Going to dive into a topic that I think is so important if you are at the helm of your business and you are charting your way forward and you want to do it in as quick a time as you can with the most support and enthusiasm for the journey. So often as a leader, we can feel alone at the top, right? Like when we've heard that phrase a million times, but it's true. There is more risk involved. When you're at the top, it doesn't matter. Like you put yourself in the space of visibility and people are critical of whoever is at the top. And this can be employees, this can be clients, this can be competitors. And my guess is if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably a pretty high performer who's very ambitious, so probably naturally committed to some level of competition, or at least you feel like you've succeeded in competitive environments. And we know whether you've been an athlete or however this has shown up, it's nice to be coached. It's nice to have somebody with a vantage of viewpoint, if you will, of the entire field and know who to go where and how to play it. As entrepreneurs, we're often the coach doing that for all of our team members and trying to come up with these strategies. And we sometimes don't know if we're doing well. We don't have a lot of visibility sometimes around our results. That's not necessarily true, but I think that's a largely felt perspective. So I'm just bringing that to this conversation. I do think there are ways to measure your success, like retention and feedback, et cetera. But I think a lot of us want that feedback, especially when we've seen ourselves rise to a high competitive level because of someone speaking into our lives, telling us, you need to practice this. This needs more help. And so as we commit ourselves to growing our businesses, there are moments in time in the journey where you feel like you've stagnated or you're stuck. And when you hit those points, you start to look around and go, what am I missing? What am I not seeing here? And we often can find ourselves looking for solutions and finding really thought-provoking thought leaders and consultants and coaches that we sit there and we go, should I hire them? Am I being led to them for a reason? The more you're connected to your intuition, the more you might have those suspicions of like, why is it the third time that I'm listening to a podcast with this voice on the phone or not on the phone, but in the recording, and maybe there's some synchronicity here. But if you're definitely not yet in that space, and that's okay, you might really want to have more of a linear thought process on how you choose who supports you based on where you are in your business. And I have a lot of opinions about this. And the reason I feel like it's valuable to share, I mean, obviously I'm a business coach who works with entrepreneurs as a coach, not a consultant. I care about that distinction. You might go, I have no idea what that distinction is. That's what we're going to talk about today. But the way that I feel like this is the most valuable, the way I could package this with the most value is to share with you the profound differences that I have experienced as a service provider when I was a business consultant, and then what led me into the coaching world and what the skill set difference is there and what those breakthroughs create as a transformational coach compared to a strategic business consultant. I just think it's such an interesting conversation. And if you are feeling stuck or stagnated and you want to level up, you want to scale, you want to step into the next iteration of you or your business, side note, it will always be a next iteration of you. And that next iteration of you will always drive your business. So it is about you. You want to know who you're hiring and why. And I hope I can share with you my experience. You'll have your own, of course, but this will just add to the conversation and the depth that you're having as you consider how to move forward, because there's a lot more to it than I think I was ever led to believe. I didn't know what a coach was besides an athletic coach. Like I was coached in soccer. I was coached in dance. I was coached in the things, piano even. I had teacher, I guess, teacher coach. Like I always kind of thought of those as the same thing. So when and I don't even remember how young I was, but I was in my early 20s when I was called by a local consulting company to ask me questions about LinkedIn, actually, This is when social media, not to date myself, but I don't really care. I'm 37 years old. And when I graduated college in 2009, social media was moving way beyond college students with Facebook into real estate agents having a professional bio and then a personal bio for their high school friends, and toggling between their external persona versus who they really are. That was back when people thought you could, and this is kind of laughable now, but back then people thought you could actually have two different identities online, and that wouldn't at all be questionable or distrustful. Nowadays, we know, like, it's just be you everywhere. And that's the best model. That's the best strategy. But anyways, I digress. Back then, people didn't know much about not consulting, but in social media. And me being a millennial in my 20s, it was like, I was shocked how I was viewed as so credible so quickly, simply because I knew things about social media. So I got on the phone with one of the partners of the most respected local consulting company. And that's how I understood consultants. Like, if you weren't going to be, I remember I interviewed with Deloitte and some of the big four accounting firms. They also had consulting branches. And I did not move forward with that company because they told me I would have to travel 75% of the time. And so my understanding of consulting, my father was a consultant, my grandfather was a consultant. I definitely come from a traditional background where just the men worked for the most part. And so I knew, not that I had consulting in my blood, but kind of. Like, I knew that my family, were respected for our intelligence, were respected for our opinions on things. And I thought, well, that sounds like an exciting career path. So when that local company called me and wanted my advice, because my boyfriend at the time, who's now my husband, was their client, and they had said that they were trying to figure out social media. And he said, well, you should call my girlfriend. She knows all about it. And I was doing a lot with social media for real estate agents and like trying to help them figure out how to like present themselves online. And it's so funny because, like, I feel like it's so full circle right now because I am fully a personal brand now on social media, and have been having to rediscover and reconnect to that whole side of things that I very much didn't even need to have a personal brand in my 20s. I was people would sell projects that I would then go and consult on. So I really could just show up as the consultant. Obviously, that's not how they hired me. So they ended up hiring me because we had that great conversation about social media. And they're like, this girl knows what she's talking about. Let's bring her in. And they started me in a support role for the consulting company, which I really respect, because honestly, nowadays, I feel like so few people start like a coach, or like people show up as a coach and consultant so prematurely nowadays. I find that I'm really grateful for the path that I took, because I spent years understanding how to read profit and loss statements, understanding how to cast a business valuation and solve for variables in the marketplace that are subjective, how to do benchmarking across different industries and understand the health of a business from the numbers. The emotional intelligence part always came very easily for me. Probably should have been my first clue that I was highly intuitive, but I've always been able to read people really, really well. And so like HR, marketing was always really fun. So like my strongest suits early on in consulting were human resources and marketing. And then I was most intimidated by the financial component. I think a lot of us women going into business, whether we're the entrepreneur or not, understanding the numbers, the metrics, the language, the law, the best ways to protect yourself, all the different things like that can feel really intimidating. And I was so grateful that I got to work and shadow and come alongside of very seasoned consultants, some of whom ran billion-dollar companies before, some of whom had like 6 startups under their belt, others of whom were, the most respected humans in our kind of corner of the world. And I got to be with them. And I got to learn how they do things, how they write job descriptions, how they recruit people for companies, how they manage the sales process, how they understand how to audit pipelines, and how to take a construction company that's losing thousands of dollars a month and they can't figure out why, and really button it up and figure out where they're siphoning all that money. Where's it going? Finding out that, digging into the numbers and finding out that they're being cheated by a bookkeeper, all these crazy things, or how to structure a really competitive compensation model to go and poach some epic person and do it with integrity and not, ruin relationships in a small town. It was just been so fascinating. And I remember I would sit in those meetings and I would take so many notes. And it wasn't actually notes about the client, if I'm being perfectly honest. I sat there for years taking notes as, what amazing questions were these clients asking the lead consultant in the room? And what was the lead consultant's response? I feel like that would be such a cool resource. Obviously, there's, NDAs that I signed and the protecting the confidentiality of who the decision makers were. So I have to be careful what I can share. But I just learned so much for those years. And as a young woman in my 20s, to have a seat at the table where 7, 8, 9-figure CEOs are making big decisions about their business, and to have them all ask me my opinion, because even in those early days, they would ask me what I would think. I remember being so intimidated, and thankfully I had an incredible mentor, Michael Gunther, who would say, Paden, you need to stop thinking that you're so young. And I'm like, dude, I'm like 24 years old, giving these 55, the dudes my dad's age, advice about their 5th generation 9-figure business. Like, I feel a little intimidated here. And he would say, as soon as you open your mouth, people forget how young you are. And he was right. This is some of the magic of being an old soul, is we actually sit on a reservoir of wisdom and knowledge that we truly can't account for, but it is witnessed and it is acknowledged by those listening. So I spent years doing that, eventually became like a junior consultant, and then became a consultant where I was leading my own projects. And I felt so held and so mentored and so groomed over those years that I built a reputation and confidence within myself that I really understood business. Now, I didn't deal with multi-billion dollar companies. The companies that I consulted around were between $500,000 and 9 figures. And our sweet spot was probably multi-7-figure to multi-8-figure. That was incredible for me. And so in the emergence of the entrepreneur boom, I don't know if anyone's calling it that, but that's what it feels like. At least now it's moving into side gigs, and everybody sort of has something. They're estimating 60% of the workforce in a couple of years is going to have some kind of side gig that they're trying to monetize for leverage as well as for increased cost of living. So it's a really cool skill set to have. It was also really great because I ended up leaving consulting. It took me like 6 months to make that decision because I'm really loyal. And serendipitously, all of my consulting engagements ended the same week right before Christmas break, which in this consulting firm, they would always give you the week off between Christmas and New Year, which I think is like a gold standard for every business. In the West, where we celebrate Christmas and everybody wants time off and nobody's working, you might as well just give your whole team the week off. And that's definitely what we've done in our businesses, and that's been really successful. So there's one little hot tip. But I ended up realizing, like, the writing was on the wall. All my clients, this never happens. We would have 6, 9, 12-month contracts, staggering start times. And I was always onboarding and offboarding clients depending on, wherever we were in the year. So for it all to come down to that 1 week, I basically just decided it was time for me to support my husband's dream, which was to take his personal training and group coaching business into actually a business. At the time, it was in a large big box gym, and he was training, I want to say by that time, I think he was training maybe 90 people, which was a lot for a trainer, but he had a couple coaches underneath him, and he really wanted to make it a successful business. And I had the skills to do it, and we built it to a profitable 7-figure business. And it was super fun, super successful. And then I burned out. And then I face planted because it wasn't my dream. And I think this is important now that I have this viewpoint on it. I think at the time I was so frustrated at myself going, why can you not hang in there? You know, I used to work 100-hour work weeks as a consultant. And I want to say I liked it, but I also was such a workaholic. It was an absolute stress response. It's the fight stress response that when you get stressed, you lean in and you go hard. And I lived that, and it was really brutal on my mental health and my body. I had suicidal thoughts. Like if you know my story, if you read my book, I talk a lot about what it felt like. It might have looked cool. It might have sounded cool. Like if you thought any of that sounded cool, great. But the backstory is I was not doing well as a person. I had no life. I married a workaholic. So together we were just workaholics building our dreams. We didn't take a vacation for 5 years straight. It was not as glamorous as it sounds. We weren't making as much as everybody thought we should be making. We were pouring as many dollars as we could into getting people to work for us so that we could, quote, have free time, but we weren't getting a lot of free time. And because we were always pushing for the next thing. And I think that's a really relatable thing for a lot of us entrepreneurs is people can go, wow, you really have it made. And we don't have it made. And a lot of us behind closed doors or behind the scenes, we're exhausted. We're burned out. We're looking around at this nice life we've created, and we feel like we're trapped in this cage that we've made for ourselves. So there's no boss to blame when you're the boss. Sometimes when I was snarky, I would like joke that my boss was such a bitch because it was me. I don't think it was that much of a joke. P.S. And I think I will get into the dysregulation of the boss bitch in a future episode because there's a lot there we can talk about that we've normalized and vilified that's super, super sad in a way that shows that the way women are doing entrepreneurship isn't working for us for the most part. But I ended up face planning from chronic stress, going on a soul adventure, talk about all of this in my best-selling book, Take Two, which is a very light, easy read. And if you're not into reading, you can always buy the audiobook where I narrate. Was the most fun part of the whole thing was me actually narrating it. It was so fun. I would literally write a book just so I could create an audiobook. I don't know why. Maybe that's why I love podcasting, is because I just love talking. And when my words get, there's just something super magnetic for me about it. Side note. So anyways, I ended up, you know, I was an entrepreneur, face planted. I had 2 kids. I was a workaholic. My body started breaking down on me. I go to this soul adventure and I meet a woman named Kamala, who is the first, not the first intuitive coach, but she was on that trip, she was the first coach who coached me. I had never been coached before. Yes, in soccer, sure, this is totally different. She asked me such profound questions. And what I like to call, my phrase is mine your magic. Think like a miner digging for the jewel. I think a good coach knows how to witness you as there's gems inside of you. There's wisdom. You are your own healer. You are your own guru. You hold your own magic. And a good coach would never rob you of that. Simply facilitates your discovery of the genius that was already there and has always been there and will always be there for you. And I remember that experience being both triggering and frustrating and magical at the same time. And it was really confusing for me because she would say things like, you know, why do you think that is? Or what do you think you need? And I would just think, gosh, I'm so used to someone telling me what I need and what's wrong with me and why there's 3 things I have to do tomorrow, or I'll never get the thing that I want so much. So for someone to put that on me and not give me an answer triggered the fuck out of me. I wanted to like fight her the first time that happened because I thought, woman, I am paying good money to be here and you better give me the answer because I am paying you to tell me what to do. I don't want to give away the rest of this episode, but I think that is a huge part of me being trained as a consultant. There was a major blind spot there, which is believing that I have to be the smartest person in the room and I always have to have the answer for other people. And that had what I would have said had been a major service to me. I'd made a ton of money doing that and grown a business because of doing that. So like, why would I discount that? That was very successful. But this was the first time somebody looked at me and held space for me showing up as the guru for my own self in a moment where I felt vulnerable, in a moment where I felt profoundly lost and at a loss for what to do next. This was not a time of empowerment for Paden. This was my rock bottom. And I hired a coach in this Soul Adventures, one of the sessions, but in my mind, I hired her, even though Angel Guide Rick really put all that together. Again, you should read the book. It's hilarious when I get into how I came across this whole experience to begin with. But she ended up asking me what I needed. And I came away, I mean, I don't want to spoil it, but I came away from that session thinking that she had given me a prescription for a happy life, literally. And I recorded the whole session, which I think is really fun to do sometimes with a coach that most consultants won't let you do, is record them. But a lot of coaches, especially with their intuitive, they record them because they are mouthpieces for wisdom, and wisdom's just flowing out of them, and your own wisdom's flowing out of you. And it's this like incredible cocktail of just wise, deep, profound takeaways that you really want to listen back to on a hike. And I re-listened to that before I published my book. I had this intuition, like, you need to go back and reread the chapter where you talked about this intuitive coach, because in my original draft of the book, and I'll tell you why I'm telling you this here in a minute, because it's such a profound takeaway for me. The way I wrote this chapter in my book originally was that Kamala, had told me, Paden, you need to spend 2 hours a day at least alone. That will bring you back home to yourself, your sensitivity, and balance. It will bring your entire body back into balance. There was my prescription for a happy life. That's why my book's named Take Two, because I rehabbed my entire self by taking 2 hours of alone time. The very thing I was the most scared to do was be alone with myself, who I was not a fan of. Well, when I re-listened to that audio, I couldn't believe my ears, because it had been over a year and a half, maybe, since I had even listened to it again. She never told me take 2 hours. I was the one who came up with that. When I re-listened to myself in that session, she had said, Paden, what do you think you need? And I remember being triggered as fuck, as I've already described. And I said, blurted right out, which for me is a sign it's intuition. I blurted, I need 2 hours alone. And she said, at least. So because she said at least, I gave her credit for the prescription. I literally, I wrote my whole book like she had given me the prescription. And when I went back and listened to that episode, I realized the most profound thing. I was so used to people telling me how to improve, how to be different, and give me criticism and how to be better at anything I wanted to be in my life. I couldn't even hear that the wisdom came from me. I gave her credit right away because I was so used to giving credit to someone else for the thing I was supposed to be doing. I was so not used to asking myself. I didn't trust that I had the wisdom. I definitely bypassed my genius constantly because I was also conditioned as a woman to do that. So that was my first experience of hiring a coach. So after that session, I actually hired her as an intuitive coach for me for 3 years easily, at least 2. And I was always uncomfortable in the sessions. Like, I don't think that it ever really got to a place where I was truly comfortable, because that's the point. If you're serious about growth, comfort is not what you're seeking. You're seeking that place where you're agitated enough to do something to move you forward. And a good coach isn't there to be your friend and isn't there to make it easy for you. They're not there to make it a bitch either. Like, they're not trying to make it miserable, but they are trying to find that spot before you run away, before you go into stress. And they will hold you at that spot for your breakthrough, which will come from you literally 100% of the time. And I started to realize from my experience with coaching from her, I was creating so many profound breakthroughs about one of my biggest things at that time was, how do I hold a boundary with a family member who has rejected me or is giving me silent treatment in public. Like, how do I set a boundary and how do I stand up for myself? How do I protect myself? And all this trauma came up for me around protecting myself against really strong opinionated people and how to do it in a kind and loving way so it's not a smack across the face. And I remember just in one coaching session, me cracking the code to how I would do that from a place of love and from a place of value, my values, because she asked me really good questions and she got me there. But she would say, I got me there. So it was so profound. So I ended up recognizing that I really wanted to figure out how to be a coach. And at this time, I was also being guided, and I don't want to go too in the weeds here, but there was a point where I was through the 2 hours a day, I found so much energy and so much restoration of my whole self. And being a big energy type of person who really does love to work, and I really do love to pour my whole self into whatever I'm doing. I'm very multi-passionate. I get bored if I'm just doing one thing. And part of my burnout was running a company that wasn't my dream, even though I loved my leadership team and I love being the leader. And I've had to mourn, honestly, mourn walking away from leading a team because it's probably one of the things I think I'm supposed to do here on earth is I just love it. But I needed to reinvent my whole self. And so I went back to school, which was humbling to do because I had a really highly paid skill set as a consultant. At this time where I was recognizing that I was running my company 4 hours a week and I really didn't need to be there 5 days a week, that I had time to explore, I got guided back into my previous consulting company, wanted me to, why do I want to say moonlight? I don't know if that's the word, but they wanted me to come back and contract consult where they could just hand me engagements. And because I knew their process and they knew and trusted me and my results and track record, they could hand clients off to me and we would negotiate the compensation rate per engagement. And it was really fun. I had like 3 to 4 consulting engagements running while I was running my company, while I'm only working 4 hours a day, while I'm being a mom, while I'm taking 2 hours a day for my alone time. Like, I'm telling you, self-care does not mean you have to get less results. That's literally what my whole book was about, was by caring for me, I exploded in creativity and ability to create positive change. It was just wild. I would have never believed that if someone had told me that before. I'd be like, there's no way I could have done that. It was blowing my mind. And I had so many people reflect to me and say, Paden, you need to go into coaching people how to do this. But I just knew I wasn't ready for it. And it was a really hard thing for me to do, was for a solid 2 years to know that I could help people, but I needed to still heal so much of inside of me that I wasn't ready to step out as a teacher around it. I could write a book about it for sure, but I wasn't ready to step out as a teacher. And I just needed to honor that with me. And so anyways, I ended up going back to consulting and I'm running the company. So I'm very focused on logic, strategy, linear, while I'm now retooling coach training through a very respected coaching program that takes almost 2 years. It took me to finish it, 500 coaching hours, hundreds of training hours, being, having peer reviews constantly, having to submit samples of coaching for review, having to do a board examination and an oral examination, and pass an ethics critique, and all these different things that I only say because there's so much bastardizing of coaching online, and it's so unregulated that you can really become a life coach in like 10 hours on a weekend, which is wild, for like $500. It's not the same thing. But I want to just describe to you what it was like for me as I was consulting and running a business, doing the things I knew to do that had admittedly already burnt me out. So there's some dissonance there for me. Is I'm running it the way I think I've always run it, but I know that I'm a different version of myself. So I don't want to run it the way I used to, but I not only want to keep my business running, but I also want to honor the company that rehired me to be a consultant and do it their way, because I can't just show up and do it Paden's way when I've been hired back by this company that has a real methodology that they follow. And I found myself in this intellectual tug of war where the more I was going into my exploring my intuitive gifts, the more I honored and recognized that I can feel people's pain. I can feel and visually see what they have lived through that has created the stuckness or the thing that they're struggling with. Like they don't have to tell me, I can feel it, I can know it, and how to be in compassion to that. And then how to address it. The coaching side really allowed me to understand how to address it in a way that stays in my lane, which is not a therapist, but allows me to ask the questions to dive into the emotion behind what, the pattern of behavior that we're dealing with. And so the more I'm learning that, and my entire nerdy, geeky self is freaking out about how amazing it is to be a coach and everyone's a genius. Like, oh my gosh, like people are so magical and they are so wise, and listen to them when they share from their mouth what's working for them. And you watch the light bulbs go off in their head because of course they're more invested in taking their own advice than following yours. Like big epiphany. I don't know if you've ever noticed that in your life, but it is always more fun for me to take my own advice than someone else, even though I paid for so many years for people to just prescribe me genius. But what the decisions that I felt the most bought in around and that I felt the most proud of were the ones that I called that shot, or I went out on a limb and I followed that instinct or that intuition or that strategy and it worked. There was such a difference in the pride that I felt around it, or the resonance with it. So I end up having a total crisis because I'm consulting now for this company. So I'm trying to honor their professional standards and their methodology, which largely, I won't say entirely, because every consultant was a little different, but there was by no means would not have been allowed to really say like, here's what intuition is, like, you should follow that, or go into maybe some emotions. I remember one time, one of my clients, and I'm trying to make sure I really don't share too much about it, but simply that there was an HR issue that could have easily gone to litigation. And the CEO clearly had biases that would have gotten him in trouble. And it was very obvious to me this came from his deep pain around his relationship to his mother. This does not come up in traditional consulting. Like, you don't go, how was your childhood? Like, right? Like, what? But like, I instantly know, like, he has not questioned his bias. And this bias is creating problems for the company. And he's a liability at this point. So there wasn't a framework for me to deal with that. I had to bypass it and move on and simply just advise him on how to avoid the hot waters of pissing someone off because you have not taken a second to be compassionate about their circumstance. A coach would never do that, because a coach would go, it's more important that you understand why this is surfacing in your life, and to confront what's so triggering for you about it, that you're behaving in this way to this person, and get to the deeper level. Well, I couldn't do that as a consultant. And it really bothered me because at my heart, I'm a healer. Truly, I used to think that was like the most cringe term, and now I just know I am here to stitch women's hearts back together and help them define their power, step into it, and be massive game changers in the world. And healing is the first step. So I care a lot about getting to the root of things where I can. And if I can't, I definitely refer out to professionals that need to be involved. But it's really important to me that that doesn't get bypassed. Even if I'm not the right professional for it, I will find the right professional for them. So I've really had this tug of war. And I remember on a Friday, I was in meditation. You can call it God. I was calling it my spirit guides or spirit. And I was simply saying, what do I do? Because I don't feel at peace consulting anymore. And I felt kind of foolish because it had only been a year back since I was toggling running the business and consulting. And I was so lit up by coaching, but I was in such a turmoil because as a consultant, I could get paid so much more, I thought, versus as a coach, I didn't think I could, because I hadn't discovered the concept of a transformational coach, which leads people from one identity into a completely different reality. And that's really what everyone's paying for, regardless of a consultant or a coach. But at the time I was like, it's just no one understands what a coach is. They think it's like high performance coaching. Like, what even is it? When a consultant seems more like logical and like more left brain, and it makes more sense to say, like, I hired a consultant around cocktails with some friends than I hired myself a coach. Like, a coach for what? Right. So I was second guessing all of that. And I just sent out this beacon of clarity to the universe and just said, make it really obvious to me which path to take. And on Monday, I opened my inbox because I'm cool like that. And I don't check my emails. I rarely even check my phone on the weekends or even nights. And I ended up seeing every one of my consulting engagements needed to, for literally unnatural, never have I ever seen these kind of circumstances show up, cancel, pause, or terminate their consulting agreement. Like crazy stuff. And I can't say because it could give it away if you live in this local scene, but just crazy stuff was happening. And I was like, you can't make this up. I literally asked for this. It was so obvious to me that I had asked for this clarity on Friday. And by Monday, gone. And I had to go talk to the owner of the consulting company and go, I'm pretty sure I just manifested this. Here's what's really going on. I'm finding myself in this tug of war around consulting versus coaching, and I'm building a skill set, and I'm finding so much more resonance around coaching the whole person and not just the boss person. And I don't know how to do that under your model. And I want to honor and be respectful to what you've built, but I don't know how to do that and step into the coach that I'm supposed to be. And so we ended up kind of parting ways amicably. And then I just go into launching my book at that time and coaching. That's all. I rebuilt my entire ideology from the ground up. It was the hardest thing I've ever done, is to rewire myself professionally. And here's a couple things that I just want to bring in around what was rewiring for me, moving from a consultant mindset to a coach mindset, because it really was clarifying for me. And essentially, I guess the way I would say is, like, consulting is very left brain. You do this, and then this happens. And then you have 2-3 things that you can do. 60% of option A works out well. So let's go with option A. If option A works this way, there are 6 things we can do. And if those 2 things don't work, we'll do this third thing. And then, like, it's so linear. You could mind map this for pages around which twists and turns are likely to create what effect. The reason why consultants love that is it feels safe and it feels predictable. And you feel like you can use the collective IQ, if you will, or like the collective experience to predict outcomes, but it does not take into consideration the individual, their goals, whether they're building a lifestyle business or whether they're building a high growth business where they're willing to sacrifice in the short term for longer term gains, all that different stuff. So left coaching for, or consulting for me, was more science. It was more tested, and it was more strategic, but like, don't be creative necessarily about it. Just follow what works, follow other people's success, reverse engineer everything. So that's what I was used to. I was used to having to be the smart one. I was used to having to be paid to give smart answers, because remember what I said the first time I said, when I got that coach, and I felt like I needed her to tell me what to do to fix my life. And I was pissed when she asked me what I needed to do. And I'm like, that's why I'm fucking here in Sedona. Like, you're supposed to tell me what to do with my life. Don't turn this around. I didn't pay you hundreds of dollars for this session for you to turn it around on me. Like, what the fuck, right? Because I'm a consultant. I want you to be smarter than me. I want you to have an answer for me, to prescribe for me what I have to do with myself. Coaching, on the other hand, was way more art, way more intuitive, way more feminine, way more creative. Right brain kind of coaching. Coaching means you don't come to a meeting or a session knowing what you want to get out of it. You literally clear your energy, you clear your mind, and you show up, and you only engage with what is, what comes forward from the client in front of you, which was very uncomfortable for me. I was like, well, what if it goes south? What if it goes in a way I can't control? All my control issues came up. I had to repattern a lot of that. As a consultant, I really held my clients, sadly, but the truth was I held them as people who needed to be fixed because they wouldn't have come to me. It's like, I'm a doctor for businesses, so your business must be sick. You must have gotten it to a sick place. Therefore, you don't necessarily have much to do here. I should really be paid to correct the whole mistake that you've made, right? So whether that, no consultant would ever admit that, but underneath what's going on is a sense of, you're paying me to fix your problem and I'm a professional problem solver. A lot of consultants pride themselves on solving problems. And so if you hire them, you are identifying yourself as a problem to be solved, essentially. And it's very prescriptive and telling clients, whereas coaching was very much like facilitating the client's own breakthroughs, their own resonance, bringing up their own kind of what they're wrestling with and anchoring it into what are their personal values, what's the wisdom in their body saying. I mean, it was like so different. But I was so alive when I was coaching, and I was like, this is the juice. Like, I can feel how powerful this is. I don't give a shit if the world recognizes it as a really good skill set or not. Like, which at the time I was questioning whether it was a good skill set or not, but the profound breakthroughs people were experiencing was so powerful, especially women, because we have been so conditioned away from our own genius in favor of, external opinions about everything and anything we do, that we've forgotten that we hold so much wisdom inside of ourselves, that we can heal ourselves. So it was really cool to come back to that. So I just want to kind of wrap up this conversation around why I think female CEOs should reconsider hiring business consultants. I think as it stands right now, I love business. I think there are times where you need an actual business answer. Like, should I create an LLC, an S Corp, or a C Corp? Like, what do you think you should do? Yeah, maybe we'll get there, but like, I do think there is a time and a place for that. But I do think that it should never bypass the way a coach engages with a client should be paramount. So let me share with you my thoughts, if you're a female leader listening to this, why a female leader or CEO should reconsider hiring business consultants, or at least should filter who they work with based on these 4 things. So the first thing is, I want you to know most consultants have not created their own model. I don't necessarily present that as a criticism, more as an observation because of what it creates. So most traditional consultants follow someone else's methodology, whether that came from a best-selling book, whether that came from a formal process. I know even the group of consultants that I love, who I worked with, they had there was like coursework that was done to help create 99% of the frameworks that they would create and work everyone through. So because of that, it creates safety. It creates a sense of structure that's really powerful. If you're a consultant, it makes it easy to learn, makes it easy to follow. So there's, you can see the appeal because it makes it really easy to rinse, repeat, and keep going. The trouble is when the client in front of you isn't getting results with your framework and you don't know, because you didn't create it, you can't deconstruct it and rebuild it for someone else. So you make it their fault often is what would happen. Like, their mindset sucks. They should probably figure out why they're so angry. They're just lazy, or they just don't show up and do their work. Like, we need to like rally them and motivate them to get their shit done. Versus, what about our process isn't working for this client? Where am I noticing that they have resistance? Because plenty of entrepreneurs are deeply creative people who actually hate process. I mean, half the time what I would notice is super creative entrepreneurs are hiring these consultants to beat their ass into routines and systems that they secretly despise and want to rebel against every day. So it was like this crazy time sometimes where it's like, they're not bought in, but the reason they're still here is they're paying 10 grand a month to be here. And so of course they're going to do it because they've paid enough to give a shit, but they don't like this. And if they had an option between A and B, they would choose C, and we're not even offering B. So it would just feel like we were getting too married to the framework and we were too rigid with the process, that there wasn't much room for art. There wasn't much room for intuitive guidance with how to work best with different clients. Now, that's just with traditional consultants. You throw in the online business consultants or business coaches, which they're bastardizing the word. I know I care, you probably don't. It's okay. I care about it because a coach literally doesn't literally minds your answers. It doesn't tell you their opinion. And that's what a lot of business coaches are doing. And here's what I find to be flawed in the online coach space is most online coaches' first business is their consulting business or their coaching business. Meaning they don't have a lot of track record of success outside of themselves, and they bust their ass hiring a ton of sales and marketing coaches out there so that they can hit their first $5,000 month. Once they hit their first $5,000 months, they are all over the internet talking about how they hit 5,000. They show one screenshot to prove they aren't making it up, and they go. And a lot of them never make another $5,000 month. And the reason I can say this with some degree of confidence is because I've been in masterminds where so many online coaches that look like they're fucking so popular and so incredibly successful, and behind closed doors, they can't pinch two pennies together, but they had one good month that they're still rolling off of years later. So they hit these big money months, and then that's what they talk about. And what's hard to me watching that is, it's like part of me like loves when someone's willing to go all in on it, but I find it problematic when they're not in integrity with it. And I think what's also tricky is that then they'll go and hire and I hear this from anybody that sells a course online, how many people just steal their stuff, steal their frameworks, and like they buy a sales course. Now that's their sales strategy for their business coaching program. Then they buy I don't even know if any business coaches actually take finance classes anymore, but like maybe they learn a couple things about how to manage money and now that's their framework. Or, so many business coaches are really just teaching sales and marketing these days and not actually leadership, management, systems, processes, tax planning, finance. Like there's so much more to it. And it just feels like the online coaching space is preying on really desperate entrepreneurs that are on their last lifeline. And so I struggle with that because I'm like, so many of these coaches have stolen their frameworks or ripped them off and not given credit to where they got them, and they're piecing it all together. So no matter where I look at, I feel like everybody's piecing their frameworks together. Something that has been really challenging for me as I think about my process and my frameworks has been to discipline myself not to rinse and repeat anything, but to literally go back to what I know works, what I have seen work, and then distill it to the core piece, not the 17 steps someone else said, and be like, well, you know what? I didn't need 17 steps. I needed 2 steps. So I'm just going to teach those 2 steps and I'm not going to be too worried about it. All right. The second place is prescriptive roadmaps. So this is something else that I think is really, really important when it comes to finding a coach or staying away from certain consultants. They get prescriptive. This is a very classic thing. And a lot of people want that. Like I said, I wanted someone to prescribe for me ABC 1, 2, 3, the 17 steps I had to do to have a 99% chance at success. Like that's what everybody wants, is the magic pill, right? Like I want it sometimes too. Like sometimes I'm like, you know what? I don't actually want to mind my magic. I just need to tell me how it goes. And then I sit there and I go, why? So then you can just sound like everyone else. So here's the issue I have around prescriptive roadmaps is simply reverse engineering someone else's success that worked X number of times with this, without even acknowledging that it's with this type of personality who has a stay-at-home someone taking care of all of their children, who doesn't have to have the workload at home. Like there's so many problems to me with just reverse engineering someone else's roadmap and then making it your fault when it doesn't work. That's what I see happening, is so many people are buying into these prescriptive roadmaps or these coaches that have their frameworks, and then they feel like shit when it doesn't work for them. But you know what? It was never designed to work for them because 17 things that would have predicted your failure were completely ignored by the coach because they only know how to follow someone else's breadcrumbs. That's a problem. I'm getting like into it. The other thing that kills me, and I think I have been guilty of this too, so I'm just going to throw this out there. I feel like I have had to learn this one myself again, which is if you are a professional thought leader, you're in professional services, you want to be seen as a thought leader, you want to be viewed as this personal brand. Your number one concern is how to stand out from the crowd. And what you will likely do is get scrolling on social media and see all these people being like, I'm a personal brand strategist. Like, I'm this, I'm that. Like, I have so many amazing people who are incredible at personal brands. Half the time I'm like tempted to take all their courses. And then I'm like, remember though, Paden, like even like, stuff. So just like do the thing, like, remember that there's wisdom in you too. But what I see happening is everyone sounds the same. Everyone. I even tested this on myself and I unfollowed everyone, including good friends of mine who I was worried I would forget to stay in touch with, which I'm like, were they good friends to begin with or not? So I had to go through a whole thing with unfollowing so many people. I even like lost my Instagram account because I was unfollowing so many people to bring it down to, I think I only follow like a couple dozen people now. And it clarified for me so much my message because I wasn't sitting there in an energy of reading everyone's genius that all sounded the same. Everyone's talking about nervous system regulation now. A few years ago when I was learning about it, wasn't such a big thing. And probably a few years before that, it was really not a big thing, but now it's a big thing everyone's talking about. Emotional intelligence, sort of like there's like waves of trends and everybody picks up on the same wave of trends and no one's standing out as a result. And it's because of these prescriptive roadmaps. You got to make this many reels. You've got to do a talking head model. You've got to do faceless marketing now. You've got to do all these different things versus what's lighting you up. What type of content's making you excited? What are you doing from a place of love and alignment? Or what are you forcing yourself to do that you secretly hate and want to throw up doing? Because as if people can't read that energy, no wonder your posts aren't taking off, right? So it's really, to me, I find the prescriptive roadmap, I get why it's so appealing. Truly, I totally get why it feels like a good move to follow someone with a proven method, a proven roadmap. Like I know from a marketing perspective that those phrases outperform other phrases like will discover your own codes to success or whatever that I've used that I feel like are in more alignment to my brand. Because we like predictable roadmaps. We like following frameworks. The trouble is those frameworks often do not take into consideration you, your energetic signature, what's lighting you up, what you hate, what you love, and even going into like, why do you hate it? Is it because you're afraid and that's an area of that's a growth edge you can move through? Or is it because you really hate it and you don't want to do it? And it's not about fear. It's just you don't like it. So I find that my ideology goes away from prescriptive now and goes into creative. Like, what do we need to create for you that's going to work for you? That as a coach is more nerve-wracking, to be fair. It is easier to say, well, this is what works. If it doesn't work for you, something's wrong with you. I mean, that's obviously feels better as a consultant to go, well, they just didn't do the work. But as a client, what feels better is to have somebody help tailor it to you, to understand the energetics around magnetism and to understand that you don't, like, how many social media viral people have burned out and like hate their lives and have major mental health issues because they weren't ready to go viral, because they weren't able to hold that much attention at one time. You don't want premature success. I know that sounds crazy, because maybe you're like, no, I literally take any success in any shape or size. Like, I'll take it now, I'll take it tomorrow. Like, I can tell you, this is just a very personal thing. I know that there's going to be a time where the level of success that I reach will meet where I've always known I would go. Like, there will be a point where I go, I'm here. I am living that future version of me that I always knew I could be. And there have been years where I've been restless to get there. And now, being a few years ahead, looking back, oh, I'm so glad it didn't happen then, and I wouldn't have been ready. I would have gotten butt hurt if someone had said one critical thing about a freaking earring that I had in a video or something weird. So I do believe that there's just trying to get success from a place of desperation doesn't usually create the kind of abundance and joy and alignment that we're ultimately really looking for. And I know that's not the sexy answer, but it is my answer. The third thing that I think is really important when it comes to hiring business consultants is so often they bypass your inner guidance. And it's not because they think you're an idiot. Sometimes they do. I mean, I know because I've talked to consultants about clients be like, oh God, they're such an idiot. How come they don't see this? Blah, blah, blah. Well, they don't see that because they can't see that. They don't have your thousands of hours sitting there talking to CEOs and seeing the trends. Like they don't see that. They only see themselves. So of course they can't have that perspective, right? But what consultants feel a lot of pressure is to give you the right answer. So rightness is more important than accurate, than guiding you to a place where you're discovering it. So I feel like that's really important to understand. And they're not necessarily doing it because they're bad people. Obviously not. I think consultants are such generous and they are teachers at their heart and soul. They want to create breakthrough for people, but they're doing it with a lot of pressure on them to carry the torch. Their goal is to be, I mean, they might say they're trying to work themselves out of a job, but watch what they do. They insert their opinion a lot more than they're asking you for what you think is going to work and putting you in that discomfort of having to really sit in your unknowing and come to what you do know. That is not a place that we are comfortable with, especially in Western culture. And so as a woman, like it is really important that we surround ourselves with people who hold us in our sovereignty, who hold us as the wise woman, as the sage, as the seer, as the oracle. Like understand that we hold magic inside of us. There is so much reclamation and healing around this. To hire a consultant who feels all this pressure on themselves to be the smart one and to give you the right answers, then put you in this weird place where you then have to go inside and maybe you don't agree with them, but you've paid them so much money, you feel like a fool not taking their advice. So then you double bypass your own advice. And then you're mad at yourself later. And all of this could be avoided if we could just hold each other to the highest potential of the version of us we haven't yet become. But everyone in that room knows that version of you is possible and wants that version to show up today because that's how you quantum leap in life and business. And that's what you don't get in consulting because they're so obsessed with being right, so obsessed with giving you the perfect answer, the perfect formula, the perfect research. And I can tell you the amount of hours I would spend researching before meetings just to sound like I knew what shit I was supposed to talk about. Like Google searching stuff in between meetings so that I would sound smart when you could have Google searched or even just gone into your inner wisdom and found the answer right then and there. And I don't think enough people talk about how prevalent that is as well. All right, so the next point and the last point I want to make around why female CEOs should reconsider hiring business consultants is that consultants are programmed, I believe, to view their clients as people they need to fix. And I alluded to this earlier, which is that when you're a consultant, your identity is around, I'm a problem solver. It's like the cornerstone of why you love consulting is because you love solving complicated things. I used to say that all the time. I'm a professional problem solver. And when a client comes to me with a broken business or a stagnated business or they're fried, it's like you're someone to fix. That's problematic. I don't know about you, but have you ever hung out with someone who thinks it's their job to fix you? It's not very fun. I used to go around doing this when I was a consultant. I would go around and try to fix everyone in my life, even if they didn't pay me. Be like, oh, I know some shit about that. Let me give you some free advice. Because everyone loves free advice. I think that might be the hardest thing that I had to learn from coaching was not centering my opinion. And it's sometimes I mean, I do it more in this podcast because it's my platform and I get to share my experiences and my opinions, but I don't do it when I'm with my clients unless they specifically ask, or I feel like I'm intuitively led to share something that will add a new perspective or a more concrete way of understanding something that might feel too vague. But for the most part, I steer really clear from it because I find that when we look at people like they're someone to fix or their business is flawed and we put on our capes. I used to have a therapist that would say, "Oh, Paden, you must be so tired putting on your superhero cape every day." And I'd be like, why would that be hard for me? I love to be fucking Wonder Woman every day. It's like, how exhausting. And it was, I clearly burned myself out and had adrenal fatigue and almost had Hashimoto's autoimmune because I was heroing everyone. And if you've ever learned about the drama triangle, it's sort of like what creates drama for people. It's, you're either the villain who's picking on everyone and hypercritical. You're the victim who just is like, oh God, everything's being done to me. I can't handle my life. Or you are heroing everyone. Oh, you can't do it. That's okay. I won't teach you how to fish. I'll just go fish for you. I'll just do it for you. And you see a lot of women heroing because we're conditioned to be the support systems to the patriarchy. And therefore we're conditioned in a lot of ways to show up and just do it for you, which is why delegation tends to be a pain point for female leaders. It's also a pain point for men. It's just that women have more conditioning around not asking for help because it's seen as weak, or, trying to overly care for everyone's needs but your own. And so sacrificing, all that's much more heavily conditioned to the feminine. But it creates a murkiness. No one wants to be heroed. I know that it is so tempting to get on a sales call with a coach or a consultant and just literally go, can I just hand you dollars to get a transformation? But we also know, like, in no other area of life do you really get that. Like my son, we're trying to get him to learn to swim before we go back to Mexico because my husband and I are like, this is going to be great. We want to be able to relax around the pool and not have to worry about a kid if they're going to be drowning. It's not to say we're not still going to keep our eyes on our kids, because obviously I have a judgment around parents that drink a ton of cocktails as their kids are like bobbing in an open pool and no one's really watching them. But we've been like thinking about how to get him to swim. And yes, if I could hand someone a certain number of dollars to just have my son instantly know how to swim, of course I would do that. That's not how it works. He has to put some effort in, right? So we know that a transformation is something that we're willing to pay for, but don't sign up for someone who wants to hero you, who wants to just make you the next notch on their belt, the next point on their scoreboard. Because it fundamentally makes you a game that's getting played. And there's something that's just not as pure, I guess is a more kind way to say it. It's not as pure as it could be. And I want you to, my advice would be, hold yourself to not needing to be fixed or saved and showing up for your own rescue. And part of you doing that is hiring a guide, not a guru, to pull from my friend Kelly Brox. That's the title of her podcast, by the way. She's awesome. You should go listen to her podcast. Guide, not guru. I was like, that's such a good name for a podcast. She's awesome. Okay. So those are the 4 reasons that I wouldn't, let me just summarize that real quick. 4 reasons why I think female CEOs should reconsider hiring business consultants. Or 1, most consultants don't create their own model, so they don't know how to pivot it to meet your own specific needs, which means that you're having to perform their rigid structure perfectly or you don't get good results. The second is they have prescriptive roadmaps. Meaning that they want to reverse engineer someone else's results. And similar to the previous one, that can rob you of the sustainability and the curated methodology that will actually work better for you. We need to take into consideration more than just personality. We need to take into consideration limiting beliefs, subconscious nervous system regulation, like programming. We need to take into consideration energetic types and signatures. Like there's so much more to it that needs to be curated for you to have it work for you than just follow someone else. And then we all sound the same. We all look the same. We all are the same. and we're all trying to stand out from the crowd. Like it doesn't make a ton of sense. Then the third area is bypassing your own inner guidance. A lot of times consultants feel a lot of pressure to be the smart one, to give you the answer. And by putting all that pressure on themselves, they center their opinions in your world, and you're paying them to give opinions about your world without them being in it. And now you feel obligated to have to follow it because you've paid all this money for them. And then you're damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, you don't feel like it was your idea. So if it works, you're sort of like, it worked, but how do I know how to do it again without them? And then you're constantly being disempowered and always having to have an external resource speak into your life for you to know how to move forward. That is not ultimately what you want. You want someone to help you start to trust yourself and unlock your own magic. And then the fourth way is viewing leaders as problems or people to fix. And consultants are professional problem solvers. By you hiring a consultant, you're saying, hello, I'm a problem. Please fix me. Please hero me. Please do what I can't do for myself. And that's not from a place of sovereignty or empowerment. And again, I just don't feel like it's in the best service specifically for women. I think that we, more than anything, need to be reconnected to our wisdom and learn how to trust it. I think that's what feminine leaders need more than anything else, is building self-trust. So when it looks to leading me right into what the 4 things I think women leaders need if they're in a place of feeling stuck or stagnant in their business, we need an approach that uplifts and empowers us. We need to work with people who partner with us to hold space for us in the version of us that we want so bad, but we haven't tried on. We haven't allowed ourselves to connect to the wisest, the most successful part of ourselves, so that we're constantly feeling like we're this small and we're only viewing our problems from this size versus the more expanded view. And when we're out of practice, because of course society does not teach us how to hold ourselves to a higher standard, or a higher vision, I should say. We're always taught to hold ourselves to a higher standard, but in a berated, disempowered way, versus what's the most magnetic, what's the most aligned and beautiful version of myself that I still haven't figured out yet. You want to have someone in your corner that sees who you can be and holds space for you there. It's really powerful. I don't know how else to describe it. And I know as a coach, I meditate before I meet with clients to connect to the part of them that's bigger and more expansive than the version of them that's in front of me at that moment. Because I want to hold that frequency. I want to hold them in a space where it's like, this is the highest version of you. You may not even believe that can be you, but I believe that can be you. And I'm going to hold you here because what I know about women is you will rise to whatever expectation is held of you, sometimes at your own cost. So I'm going to fucking hold a high space for you. And you're going to show up in that space and go, whoa, something happened in that session that pushed me into a version of myself I'm obsessed with. I didn't know I could be like that. I tapped into a whole different energy of me that I see why having access to that would be so powerful. You don't want to be with someone who's just trying to fix you and be the hero of your story. That's just like literally not okay. And any of you that have done anything with story work or storyboarding or how to tell story, because that's like super trendy, you know that the most successful people do not center themselves as the hero of the journey. The client is always the hero of the journey. The trouble I see is a lot of times coaches center themselves as the answer to everyone's problems. And it's like, that's like not what we're trying to hire for people. The second thing that women need, I believe, is to hear experiences and not be told advice. I will never forget being a part of a peer mastermind where everybody in the room had to have a multiple 7-figure business just to have a seat at the table. And I was one of 2 women in the circle, 3 women would count one of the facilitators. And I remember feeling so excited to be in that room. I was like, my God, I'm so happy to be here. And we had a rule that I, of course, hate rules, much like most entrepreneurs. I am not a system follower. I prefer to break all the rules and find my own path. And I honor that in the people because it's what makes us entrepreneurs is we buck the system. We create things from scratch. Literally, we speak into the world things that weren't there before. And so I remember we were told we couldn't give advice. Zero advice being given. And I was like, oh, this is weird. Because like I came with my 3 topics because again, I'm a background consultant. At this point, I'm just an entrepreneur, not to marginalize, but I was focused on growing a business. But I only wanted advice from the people in the room. And the shift was actually, can you just share experience? And the thing that I can never, ever forget was how quickly I get triggered historically. I don't think I get too triggered anymore because I have a different perspective now, but I for years would be triggered anytime someone's voluntarily gave me advice that was highly unsolicited. I could think about a time when somebody told you about your kid and was like, oh, they're teething. It's probably this. And you're like, I didn't fucking ask you. And I was up till 4 a.m. reading 17 articles on it. And it's not that. We can get defensive about it. But when someone just simply says, hey, I don't know what I would do if I were you, but here's what I've experienced that sounds like it could be of value. Women don't need more advice. I think we could all be agreed upon how liberating it would be not to get advice from one another, but to simply go, gosh, that sounds hard. My 4-year-old had this experience, or when my business had 10 employees, we went through this. It sounds like it's a little bit similar. Here's what I wish I would have done. If I could do it over again, I think I would have gone this way because when I tried this, it didn't work. I don't know if that helps you, but I just wanted to share my experience. That we are so much more open for because it's not someone robbing us of our sovereignty, speaking over us as if we're peons who don't know what we're talking about, triggering the inferiority complex a lot of us women just have, feeling mansplained, however it shows up, and just allowing it to you to breathe and go, gosh, someone shares an experience. They're not actually expecting you to take their advice. They're not. They're just sharing their experience in the hopes that it can be in service to you, which is a really pure energy. I will also say that it also helps to diffuse the know-it-all that a lot of us entrepreneurs have to feel confident in our jobs. A lot of us definitely put on the know-it-all concept, and underneath we have a lot of questions, but we don't front with that. We don't front with the vulnerability. We front with the, oh, I know. But like secretly you hoping that you find out the answer to the thing that you don't actually know. A nice and graceful way of engaging with people is to just share experiences. I am not perfect at this in my personal circles. I've definitely battened it up more on a professional side of things. And I've definitely had clients ask me, Paden, what's your advice? What would you do in this situation? It is so tempting for me to be like, oh, but the truth is I'm not them. I don't have their nervous system. I don't have their mindset. I didn't grow up with their parents. I didn't go through the lived experiences that are valid that they've gone through. I don't know what I would do if I was them because I am not them. I am not cell for cell them incarnated. I am only me with my nervous system, my limiting beliefs, my experiences. I cannot with any authenticity tell someone else how to do what they're supposed to do. Truly, if you get down to it, you really can't. It's flawed to begin with. The only thing we can do is say, you know what, I don't know how I would do it if I were you because I'm not you. The only thing I can share is what this person shared with me about when they went through something like that. And of course, making sure that you're not breaching confidentiality when you share that. And then watch someone exhale a little bit because they didn't actually want advice. They just wanted to have a different viewpoint to try on, to recast how they're interpreting the situation that's freaking them out. That's what most of us want, is a little breathing space around something that's very anxious and very stressful for us. We don't really want someone to tell us how to do it because if we do it, we're going to resent ourselves for following it. The third thing women need, and this one's really interesting because most women that I work with are, not most, I would say half, are really type A masculine women. And don't say that as a criticism. I have been that woman. It can feel very powerful. But it will be like that type A control freak, got my shit together, busy woman. And there is so much pressure that this woman has put on herself to compete at high levels and to bang down doors to get into spaces she would have not otherwise been allowed in. There's so much ferocious warrior energy with these type of women that when they come to the table to a coach or a consultant, they probably could think the term is interchangeable, and that's okay. I used to too. And they come to the table and they expect you to beat them the fuck up so that they can get stronger. That's what they expect. And what women need is not that. Women do not need to be beaten up. We do not need a voice of criticism that we pay for in our lives. What women are desperate for, and that these women, these type A women who I adore, they would get triggered as fuck. And you might be getting triggered hearing me say this, but you do not need someone to tell you 5 reasons why you suck as a motivation for you to get better. What you actually need is to be told why you're great and not have it be BS because you're smarter than that and you can sniff that shit out. But you need someone who can help you to see yourself with the loving and compassionate lens that your mother should have, or your critical parent, whichever critical parent handed down that inner critic to you, because you for sure inherited it. And they might not have meant to because it could have come from their parents. Like, we're not trying to cast blame here. Just acknowledge that this is a generational pattern often. What you need is to be reparented. You need to be re-nurtured. You need to be cared for because there's a little child in you that's still performing for love. And a coach can see that. A consultant might not, but a coach would see it. Intuitive one would for sure. And why that matters is you need to have someone breathing life into you, not because they're your hero, but because they're holding you up at that version of you that is not disempowered, that is not hurting, that version of you that is healed, whole, and magnificent. And sometimes we can't even see what we're amazing at because we're too close to it, or we're just so hard in our heart, we don't even know how to receive a compliment. It is so foreign for us to open our heart up for a genuine word of you've done well. That was really courageous what you did. I know that was hard, and I want to honor you in that moment. We are starving for that. And sometimes we think that we just need to hand someone a rod and go beat the fuck out of my back so that I like get motivated to move. And it's like, no, actually you need a warm hug right now. Not to sound like Olaf, but like, that's actually what you need right now is somebody to be the parent that was kind to you and to teach you how to be that for yourself. Because you're really not trying to hire someone to be the parent you shouldn't have had. You're hiring someone to help you stop beating yourself up so that you can rise. So much of what's holding and sticking us and creating stagnation and stuckness in our professional selves is deeply personal shit that we don't think has a place in the professional side of us, but it is running the show. It is the program in the computer that's running the software. And you want the software to perform. Well, you know what? The program is fucked. So let's go in there and let's talk about that. The fourth thing that women need, and this one, as I was preparing the notes for this podcast, it was just like, man, that's a quote. Women need to remember who they are, not be told who they need to be. I'm going to say it again. Women need to remember who they are, but not by being told who they need to be. Your rise to success is not you learning something you don't know. It's you remembering who you are. The first time I heard that, I was like, remembering who I am? Like, okay, I'm Paden Hughes. I was born in Palo Alto, California, oldest of 5. Like, of course, I'm like going into that space because I'm very wooden in my thinking. Like, I'm so freaking literal. that I oftentimes don't even get comedians' jokes because I'm like, okay, that like there was some nuance there I fully missed. But women need to remember who they are, especially if you are sensitive, especially if you are an empath, and especially if you have ever been called an old soul. What I need you to know is that means you are infinitely wise. This is not to say if you don't meet that standard, you aren't wise. I am simply saying many of us who are now leaders in business have been leaders of nations in past lives. I'm not saying that as a joke. I actually believe that that's true. That you incarnated at this moment in time to lead this business and to leave this impact in the world because you are reclaiming a birthright of wealth and impact and destiny that has eluded you in so many past lives, but you have wisdom from those past lives that can inform you today. You don't need to learn to do anything new. That's why I think getting someone in your corner that helps you reconnect to the version of you that will be with you for the rest of your freaking life is really important. It's not because you need to hit X amount of sales per month to feel good about yourself. It's because if you can unlock this in yourself now, think of how many decades in your future you get to access this version of you, this wisdom in you, this reservoir, this confidence, this self-trust, this mastery, this a deep appreciation for the woman that you are. Think about that. It's incredibly powerful. And even if that's not landing in your heart as truth, what could land as truth for you is that you have a lot more access to wisdom than you might even know. And connecting to the genius inside of you, connecting to the magic that you hold is really powerful and will forever be guiding your decisions in business. And if you can get away from going outside of yourself for the answers and learn to come inside of yourself for answers, you will be served for decades. You can't even put a price tag on that. So that's what I wanted to talk about today. I hope that was meaningful to you. I hope you got some nuggets coming out of that. I care a lot about women. I care a lot about business as a vehicle for growth and as a vehicle for reclaiming our wealth and our influence. And I think there is such a deep healing and reclamation for women right now in stepping up and stepping out into commerce and into a world of influence that has been dominated by the masculine, and saying, we are going to do it, and we're going to do it in a different way on our terms. We're wanting work-life balance. We're wanting freedom. We're not obsessed with our nuclear family's legacy. We are here for collective well-being. There are women rising right now that have incarnated at this time for this purpose. Getting money in the hands of women who want to help humanity is probably the most important thing that needs to happen right now. I actually believe that. I really believe women will change the world. Getting money in the hands of women is paramount right now for humanity. I truly, in my core, believe when women rise to the levels of power and influence that men have dominated for humanity, we will see a marked shift. And everyone will benefit. This isn't about getting rid of men. This is about reclaiming our place in society. And I think that women detaching themselves intentionally as they in their growth plan for themselves and their business from being told how to do things the old archaic way or the formulaic roadmap way, and getting connected back into their creative energy, their non-linear path, their magic and their intuition, and trusting themselves, remembering who they are, is how we do that. So I hope that this message is in service to you. If you have any questions and you feel connected, you want to call. I didn't even include, typically in my podcast, I will like sponsor it to promote, whatever coaching container that I'm holding, because that's really what pays for this podcast. But I didn't feel like that was what I wanted to do in today's episode. But if you're feeling drawn and you're feeling like, gosh, I resonate with this woman and I want to see what working with her would look like, go ahead, and I will leave in the show notes a link to book a strategy call with me, where we can really look at where are you stuck and what would it look like to create a path that you will get unstuck and you will break into that future version of you, that next version of your business that you can scale and really align your life with the values that make the biggest difference to you. Number one, probably being freedom. That is something I love to do. And whether we work together or not, I love those conversations. So feel free to book a call. I would love to connect with you. If not, if this message, if something connected with you in a way that you just want me to know, please jump into my DMs on Instagram, join my email list. You can email me. I love connecting to listeners and hearing what feels resonant and or what questions came up for you as you listened that could make future content or podcasts. So thank you so much for listening today and tuning in. I look forward to connecting in the next episode.